In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death.
Our Lady, seat of wisdom,
Pray for us.
Saint Peter,
Pray for us.
Saint Thomas Aquinas.
Pray for us.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Welcome, welcome. Many more people tonight than there were last night. Last night we were down to about 2 or 3. All right, let's get into it. Chapter 101, which means that we're past halfway in the book. Okay, chapter 101, unnecessary servile work. Okay. Now obviously we're talking about the third commandment. This is still part of what we're talking about with the third commandment. Thou shalt keep holy the Sabbath day. The Lord's day has to be kept holy. So what about what we're talking here? Now we're talking about work, of course, working perhaps on a Sunday, but these two words are important. Okay, unnecessary. So sometimes you have necessary work. And then servile work. Servile work generally referring to that which would take physical manual labour. Anyway, we'll look at this. So what is forbidden by the third commandment? It is forbidden. All unnecessary servile work on Sunday is forbidden. What is servile work? Servile work is that which requires labour of body rather than of mind. Okay? Labour of body rather than of mind. Remember, this is before computers. This explanation is before computers. So when this book was written, nobody had a computer. Nobody would go home and work on a computer. So we'll discuss that as we go along. Servile. That which requires labour of body rather than of mind. Okay, and this explanation, we're talking roughly 1940. Okay, so it's an 80-year-old explanation with regards to servile work, because people would make a clear distinction between servile work, cutting the grass or cleaning a house or something like that. Okay, that would have been servile work. Servile work is that ordinarily performed by labourers, so those who work in a labouring field, whether that's farming, whether that's construction, whether that's anything. So that even factory work would be a labourer. Work in which the mind has the greatest share, such as reading, writing, teaching, drawing, studying, and music practice is not servile and is not forbidden. Okay, so I'm just going to put these up quickly. Reading and writing. Reading, writing, teaching, drawing, studying, music. Okay, so these ones in 1940 were not considered servile. Servile work performed on Sunday is not considered a grievous sin unless it is continued beyond 2 hours. Okay, so this is not, remember, this is not a fixed law. You're not going to find a law written in the church that says you're allowed to do 1 hour and 59 minutes of servile work on a Sunday. You won't find that. This is a general ideal. Okay? Or becomes the cause of scandal or bad example. Number 2, employers who force their employees to do unnecessary servile work on Sundays are responsible for the violation of the third commandment. Employers should make it possible for their employees to comply with their religious duties. The trial of lawsuits and public buying and selling are also forbidden. Okay? Catholics should make provision on Saturday for their food and other necessities of Sunday so that no store may be forced to keep open on a Sunday. So, of course, anybody in here who's older than 40 years of age would remember back in New Zealand in the 1980s that New Zealand was shut on a Sunday. Everything was shut. All supermarkets, the dairies were closed, petrol stations may have been open, but everything else, movie theatres were open on Sundays sometimes, restaurants, there weren't many restaurants in New Zealand 40 years ago, believe it or not. Cafes didn't exist. Restaurants, there were very few of them around, but most of them wouldn't, they wouldn't all be open on Sundays. New Zealand was predominantly shut on a Sunday, so people would go to church and chill, just do whatever on a Sunday evening. Now everything is open on a Sunday. And people are forced to work, otherwise they lose their job, which is obviously wrong. Number 3, the non-observance of Sunday is often attended with material evils such as poverty and sickness. God is the God of nature as well as the law. Those who do not observe Sunday and keep working often lose their health and thereby sink deeper and deeper into poverty. Those who desecrate Sunday and do not hear Mass fall into all kinds of vices. In Holy Scripture we find the Jews losing their holy city and being taken into captivity because they violated the Sabbath. It's just another example of why the human race is offending God. Because we are, whether or not people are Christians, it doesn't matter. We are forcing people to work on a Sunday as if it is the same as every other day. I remember working in construction many years ago, and we used to have to work half days on Saturdays. Most of the time we'd finish at noon. And I think in the 3-4 years that I worked in civil engineering and construction, twice I had to work on a Sunday because it was a road crossing, because it couldn't be done during the week, and it was terrible. I remember at the end of the day on the Sunday thinking, tomorrow is the first day of the week and I've just worked the last 7 days. It's terrible. I mean, the idea of just having to go there for 7 straight days and then you're facing another 7 days without any break, it's not good for you. And God is obviously not pleased by it. When is servile work allowed on Sundays? Servile work is allowed on Sunday when the honour of God, our own need, or that of our neighbours requires it. So Sunday work. Which is allowed. The honour of God. So all things associated with Sunday Mass services. Our own need. That thing takes a lot of explanation. Our neighbour's need. That also takes some explanation. Okay. So number 1, preparing a place for Holy Mass is a work for the honour of God and may be done even on a Sunday. So the setting up of the church, the getting ready of the church, doing things around church. Obviously, you shouldn't be doing the vacuuming or something like that before Mass. It should have been done on a Saturday, but preparing the inside of the church and getting those things ready is part of the service for the Sunday. In a parish where women are all occupied during the week and can meet for their altar society meetings only on Sundays, it will be allowed for them to sew or repair vestments for the church, if it is that type of behaviour. Work of daily necessity, such as cooking, cleaning and sweeping, buying and selling of necessary food, may be performed even on Sundays. Sewing is not permitted, as it is not of necessity, unless you've got your clothes to go to church and you rip them the morning of the Mass, then you have to repair them if you've only got the one. So that would be allowed. Okay, so it's necessary. Even servile work, when necessary for one's support, for the common good, or to prevent serious financial loss, is permitted on Sunday. So have a quick little look at that. So servile work. Let's use an example of servile work of a farmer who has to bring in the crop. Okay, he's bringing in a crop. He can do that Monday through Saturday, no problem. Okay, however, he sees on the Weather Channel, and they say from midnight Sunday night and into Monday there will be an enormous storm coming through, heavy rain which can destroy the crop. And he's seeing this on Saturday night. What does he do? He works on Sunday. He's got to, otherwise he will have financial ruin. He will lose all of his crop, in which case he can then work on the Sunday, because that is of necessity to prevent serious financial loss, not just some financial loss. The common good. Somebody is a policeman and they are rostered into work on a Sunday. It is for the common good. Otherwise, if every policeman said, no, it's Sunday, we can't work, the criminals would go, yes, Sunday's our day. And they would go out there and cash in. It's pretty much like that in some areas in the States now. I believe that in California, any misdemeanor which is valued under, I want to say like $1,000 or under $900 is only, even if it's like, let's say, theft. If someone causes a theft and the theft is valued at under $900, the police record that as a misdemeanor, which means that they'll go into court and they'll be dismissed immediately. So now criminals just walk into shops and they just make sure they don't steal more than 900 and they just walk out. And the shop owners, you can't, they just, what are you going to do about it? It's just absolute madness. I mean, total madness. Anyway, that's what happens when you don't have corporal punishment. Farmers are allowed to care for their cattle and domestic animals, and even to get in the crops that otherwise might spoil. Our Lord does not desire man to suffer on account of Sunday, because he said, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Number 3, servile work needed by our neighbour may be performed on Sunday. For example, a farmer who has attended all week to his own farm may help a sick neighbour attend to his on Sunday. Okay, so that's when our neighbour is in need. So these things, it's a case of using reason, isn't it? You can't just plug them into exact things written on a board. You've got to use reason, and sometimes there are circumstances that allow certain things to be done. Number 4, those in charge of persons who are necessarily on duty on Sunday, such as policemen, foremen, soldiers, firemen, etc., are obliged to give them an opportunity to hear Mass, if not every Sunday, at least as often as possible. There are other things which, again, make these statements really difficult. Stuff like, what if you work in an oil field and the oil field is out at sea, or the oil field is in an inhospitable place and you don't have a chaplain? So I had this all the time when I was working in Canada. There were numerous of our parishioners who lived in the city, had their families in the city, and worked in what's called the oil patch in northern Alberta. And they would either drive up there and then stay 3 weeks and then come home for a week, or they would be flown up there and work 15 days on and 5 days off or something like that. Enormous money. And so the advice I would give them is, when is your finish date? How long are you going to work there? Because they're making big money. So let's just say someone is just a rigger, that's just a labouring job in the oil field. The rigger is making $150,000 a year and spending nothing. Okay, so that's really good money, isn't it? For someone who's a labourer. If you were a mechanic or something a little bit higher up than the labourer, they'd be on $250,000 a year. If you were a foreman or an executive or something, you could be on $500,000 a year, sort of thing. So making a lot of money. But I would always ask them, so what's your plan? You're working up there, it's good money. How long do you plan to work there? Oh, it's just good money. No, not good enough. Because you are working there at the expense of your religious duties. So therefore, it can be permitted, but only for such a time that you have reached the goal, and a reasonable goal for what you are attempting to do. What are you attempting to do? Oh, I've got to pay my university, I've got to pay my house and my car. Okay, when that's done, stop working there. Otherwise, it's greed. So just want excess of things so they can have more stuff. Okay, so it's just, again, you've got to allow the circumstances. People come out of university, $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 debt, and as a student and you're working at McDonald's, you ain't going to get it. It's not going to happen. But if you can find a highly paying job, then you can use it just to pay off your debt if you want to. Okay? It's not ideal, but in this financial day and age where we are, debt is a crushing thing that can lead people into a lot of mistakes in their lives. So overcoming that debt, if you have an opportunity to do it, you can do it. And if you can find a certain job in an oil area or something like that that happens to have a parish within 2 or 3 hours drive, then you should take advantage of that. I know a lot of Kiwis went to work in the Western Australian mines. Okay, and in Western Australia, the northern part of Western Australia, inhospitable area, terrible, terrible conditions, but high pay. Whether it's truck driving or drill or rig worker or something like that, high pay. But again, these things are always based around a contractual system where you work full stop, 7 days a week for some days, and then you have time off. And the person who's working these jobs can't take their time off in Bali or Hong Kong or something like that. They've got to take their time off with their families. They can't just go and blow all their money having fun, because in other words, therefore you don't need to work that job if you're just going to blow your money irresponsibly like that. Anyway, are amusements forbidden on Sunday? So amusements, what do you mean by amusements? Fun, yeah. Stuff that's recreational, eh? So sports, movies, computer games, to a degree. Healthy pursuits would be better served in the idea here of amusements. Amusements are not forbidden on Sunday. Not only that, only those that interfere with the Sunday obligations are forbidden, unless they are lewd. Number one, Sunday is a day of rest. On Sunday, therefore, we are permitted to relax from our daily work in wholesome recreation. Not too much emphasis should be given in competitive games as to which side wins or loses. A good loser is better than a poor winner who is proud of himself. You all remember 1987, if you're old enough, in the first Rugby World Cup here in New Zealand, and Michael Jones chose not to play on Sundays. Okay, so he was newly selected in the All Blacks that year, first time in the All Blacks, the first game of the World Cup, and then he publicly said, I will not play games on Sundays. So he stepped down from the semi-final match against Wales, and it was considered unbelievable that somebody would step down from the All Blacks because the game was on a Sunday. Up until then, there had almost been no test matches on Sundays. They were always played on Saturdays. But now, obviously, because of the market and what the market wants, they are guided by how much money they can get on TV rights, and so they just play whenever the TV rights say. So Sunday games are now played all over in all sorts of different sports. In fact, they don't really care about it anymore. God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he had rested from all his work. So if God, who needed no rest, chose to stop his work of creation, we should imitate his divine example and rest after 6 days of labour. The experience of all peoples has borne out the wisdom of this practice of resting one day out of the week. As an example, we may cite the case of the French Revolution. Has anybody ever read about the French Revolution? Okay, and the French Revolution started in the year 1789, when the rulers of France, the king and queen, and the ruling class of people, the wealthy upper class who were called the bourgeois, they were overthrown by, well, they were not actually overthrown by the poor, they were overthrown by the underclass of educated people who didn't like the fact that these other people owned most things. And so the French Revolution overthrew the king and queen and rounded up anybody who they found to be bourgeois. In other words, people of old money, families that had held money through generations, if not centuries, and were landowners and the like, and they executed most of them. Most of the bourgeois were executed. The king and queen lost their heads, and it was 3 or 4 years of total chaos. And one of the things that the French revolutionaries did was they wanted to stop the Catholic Church's influence in society. So they decided that the week would not have 7 days, that it would have 10 days. And they renamed all the days of the week and everything. They tried to eradicate religion from France. And they failed in the end, but lots and lots of people died along the way. As an example, the French atheists in control wished to change the old order completely and went so far as to change the number of days in the week to 10. They could not, however, retain the new week because even the work animals, unable to endure work without rest, died of exhaustion. Okay, so they were just working 9 days out of 10 and then having 1 day off, and in the end they worked the animals to death. Number 2, to attend entertainments such as dances up to a late hour on Saturday night, even when in themselves perhaps they are not wrong, is a poor way of preparing for the Lord's day. Those who stay up late Saturday night are inclined to oversleep on Sunday morning, and when Father Sumich has Mass at 7 a.m, you're never going to be ready in time for Mass. Even 9:30 a.m. people, I suppose there are even people who complain about that. Unbelievable. As a result, if they do not omit Mass altogether, they will not hear it devoutly because they have not enough sleep. So an outstanding example of such entertainments is the New Year's Eve all-night dancing, so fashionable in the 1940s. Okay, it was a big thing. New Year's Eve was like a massive party. People go to dances and carousels in various varieties of dress and undress, with paint and powder and all kinds of worldly decorations on their persons. Then those that feel a twinge of conscience run out for an intermission of Mass, to return perhaps to the dance or go home to sleep all the day of New Year. The feast of the circumcision, a holy day of obligation, not New Zealand anymore, unfortunately. Let any reasonable man say whether this kind of amusement is in consonance with the commandment to sanctify the Lord's day. Number 3, some people seem to take advantage of Sunday to indulge more freely in useless or sinful pastimes. It is a scandal to see people engage in excessive eating, drinking, dancing and vanity on Sundays of all days. It is an abuse of a sacred institution, the Lord's Day. The kingdom of God does not consist in food and drink. To many, the Lord's Day and holy days are nothing more than days of enjoyment. What was intended as an accompaniment becomes the main theme. Not infrequently, Sunday is taken as a favourite day for gambling, drinking, and other vices. Then, indeed, is God's day desecrated, and God robbed of the honour due him. When Sunday is desecrated by vice and unrestrained pleasure, we can expect by this loosening of morals the gradual dissolution of family ties and the final disintegration of society. Neglecting common worship, members of the family become indifferent to each other. We see this so much in New Zealand society now. When families have stopped going to church on Sundays, their familial, fraternal love is severely weakened. There is all sorts of excess because they no longer worship God as a family. Children turn stubborn and disobedient. Think of the school leaving age now. 16, 17, 18, 95% of school leavers from Catholic schools do not attend church 1 year out of school. How is it possible that they will be obedient to their parents when they are not obedient to God? Is it no wonder then that they now, immediately on leaving school, they shack up with their partner? And their parents even refer to them as partners. Their parents are not anywhere near ashamed as they should be because they do not attend Mass. They don't pray together. And the family that prays together stays together. The family that does not pray together does not stay together. So the father hardly stays home and knows strangers better than his own children. Since the children lose respect for their parents, it's an easy step to loss of respect for all authority, including the secular power. Thus, by forgetting God's day, men live like heathen and will die outside God's grace. Right, any questions on the Sunday? Particular ones or general ones?
Father, not in regards to Sunday, but on Saturday, what time is it considered like Saturday night, like it's going into a Sunday?
You mean in general or if there's something special on?
Just in general.
Okay, so because I have two fairly early masses at 7 and 9:30, a good night's sleep, in fact like a longish night's sleep is 8 hours. Okay? If you're going to be going to the 9:30 Mass, you want to be getting up at 8 or 8:30. So midnight, 12:30. However, because there are Masses throughout the day, like if we had a large parish and a large number of people, we'd have more Masses. And if you have more Masses, 7, 9:30, 11, maybe at 5 p.m. I don't like the 5 p.m. because that's for the ones who just sleep in until noon, which I'm just not interested in. Just not a good excuse, eh? I remember when we had the 5 o'clock Mass here. This is something interesting.
5 o'clock, 7 for you.
Now, I'm not pointing out to anybody in particular, but so I used to have 3 Masses on a Sunday, okay? I used to have 7 and 10. The 10 was up at Mount St Mary's, I think. 7:30 here, 10 up at Mount St Mary's, and then 5 p.m. And roughly the same number of people came to the 7 and 10, because 7 and 5, because they were low Masses, and the 10 had more people up at Mount St Mary's. But the collection at the 7 o'clock Mass was 3 to 4 times higher than the 5 p.m. Mass. Why's that?
Well, the young ones.
That has something to do with it, yeah. The younger ones were coming in at 5 p.m. and just don't have money or whatever. But it also has to do with personal discipline and personal standards. Those who come to 7 o'clock Mass in the morning, they're not interested in staying up late. They're happy to get up early to go to Mass on a Sunday, and therefore they have the whole day to do what they want to do for God. So they discipline themselves, and therefore giving money to the church on a Sunday is just part and parcel of that discipline. Those who get coming in at 5 o'clock. And the incredible thing was, and so I was not particularly kind on them, which is fair enough. The Mass would start at 5 o'clock. They would rock up at 5:05 p.m. But for the 7 a.m.ers, they'd be there at 6:20. So why is it that when Mass is really early in the morning, people get there on time, but when Mass is in the afternoon, people arrive late? What are they doing? Sleeping till 4 in the afternoon? So, as a one-off, but really we shouldn't. There's no need for us to sit around or even be up and party until 2 or 3 in the morning. There's just no need. When you are 18 and 19 and absolutely stupid, like stupidity coming out the pores of your skin, then yeah, you just think that staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning is the norm. Okay, so I lived in Croatia for a number of years. And Croatia was being a Mediterranean society, especially during the summers. You didn't go out. You went out 7 nights a week. We didn't stay at home. We didn't have a TV, didn't have a computer. We went out 7 days a week. And we would go out and we would meet friends on the promenade at the waterfront, and we'd just sit and chat. And the cafes were all outdoor, and you'd sit there on a glass of wine for an hour or an hour and a half or whatever, just chat. This is European Mediterranean society. You just chat, you just meet people. But in the summer, because it was hot, you didn't go out till, you didn't go out before 10:30. p.m. Like only the tourists would be out at 8 or 9 o'clock. It's just crazy. So you go out at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And you would stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning. But you'd been sleeping in the afternoon. Because the hottest time of the day, the locals wouldn't go out. They would just have a siesta from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And then have their dinner at 8 o'clock or something like that. And then at 10 o'clock go for a walk and walk their dinner off and chat with friends and stay out till 1 o'clock in the morning and then go home and then get up at 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock because that was the normal time you get up and you can go to Mass. So it was odd. In Western societies that are not Mediterranean, Northern European societies, they have these ideas about the work hours and the living hours, and they find it very strange when they go to Spain or something and everything's shut between Spain and Italy. Everything is shut between 2 and 5 in the afternoons most days of the week. People, let's go. I want to go shopping. Like, why are these places closed? Because everybody's asleep except for you. It's 38 degrees outside. Now, what the hell are you doing? So, how do you work that around God? I think it's a case of hierarchy. God has preference, and then your family comes second under that, and then your own bodily care and rest comes after that, and then after that would be other things. Okay, so you've got to plug in the principle into real life situations. The only time I think that you can absolutely ignore Sunday, I've never done it, but I nearly did it once, was if you fly across the international date line coming back. So if you fly from the US on a Saturday night, you arrive in New Zealand on a Monday morning.
Yeah.
So Sunday doesn't exist. But when you go back the other way, you can fly from Auckland on a Sunday night and arrive in LA on Sunday morning. So you have 2 full Sundays.
So you nearly.
So I've flown that way probably, I don't know, 10, 12 times, something like that, from the States to New Zealand, and I've made sure I've never flown on a Saturday night and arrive on a Monday. Because you're basically just omitting the Lord's Day, which would not be right. Can you fly on a Sunday then? You can fly on a Sunday. Because if you live in Aotearoa, your longest flight's an hour and a half. So you're not going to lose a day by flying for an hour and a half. But if you're taking a whole day on an international flight, you should do your best to avoid flying on a Sunday. So let's say you're flying New Zealand to Japan or Korea or something like that. It's 10 hours from Auckland to 10 hours. You would be leaving Auckland in the morning on Sunday morning at, say, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, which means you've got to be down the airport at 7, which means you can't get to Mass, and then you arrive in Korea at like 6 p.m. and then you've got to go through, or in Tokyo at 6 p.m. you've got to go through customs and immigration. You don't get to your hotel or your church until 8 o'clock at night. Everything's finished. So in other words, you miss Mass on a day like that. So that would be a no-no. You should do everything to avoid losing the Sunday in travel. People say to me sometimes in confession, "Oh, I missed Mass." So, was it your fault? "Oh no, we were travelling." So where were you travelling? "Oh, we were driving." "Oh, so there were no churches? Were we driving in North Korea?" "Oh no, we were driving up the far north." "Well, there's churches everywhere." "Oh yeah, but it's busy." So go to church. Drive in the night. Drive in the evening. Drive early in the morning. But whatever you do, in one of those situations, you must go to church. There are 250 Catholic churches open on a Sunday in New Zealand. You've got to go to church. There's no excuse. In other words, that would be a serious sin to miss Mass because you were driving. Make sense? Okay. And the servile work thing, that's everybody good with that? Even that 2-hour thing, so I want to clarify some things here. If you have your regular job, earning your money, the way that you keep and support your family by working on a computer, if you do that on a Sunday, earning the same job, then that is sinful. Just because it's servile work, that's servile work from the 1940s. Your servile work is computer work. If you spend 8 hours a day in front of a screen, working on things on a screen or something like that, then you should stop doing it on a Sunday. Because to you, that is servile work. Does that make sense? Because in the old sense, servile work was something you had to use your hands, or people with calluses and labourers and stuff like that. No, but if you earn, let's say you're a lawyer and you spend no lawyer works on Saturday, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and then you think, oh, I've got this big case on Monday, I've got to work through Sunday to do it. Well, then you should have been working through Saturday to do that instead of going and playing golf rather than doing it on Sunday. So unless something is of absolute importance that it cannot be done other than on the Sunday, you shouldn't be doing it on the Sunday. Yes?
So studying is okay.
What is? Studying is okay, yes.
But in a situation like Korea, it's so competitive, so all the students are study for the whole day.
Well, you don't study the whole day, you learn the whole day as a student. Studying is the work that you do outside of the classroom. In the classroom you're learning. When you go home, you have to study. And study is just learning, relearning, trying to memorize or something like that. Anybody who's been a student knows what it's like to cram study. So the last days and weeks before the exam, you just study. But you should still go to church. The student who is studying has to go to church. Never excused from that. Okay, any other questions?
And there's a maximum of studying, but that student can actually go to church, come back, have a couple of hours, not the whole afternoon.
Well, I mean, they can. If they got an exam on the Monday, then yeah, you go to mass, you give God God's time, and then you can study on the rest of the day for the exam on a Monday, because some people don't have good retention of these things. But that's an exception to the rule, because you don't have exams all the time. Okay. I remember in the seminary when I was in the seminary, our Latin teacher, he would have we had Latin 5 days a week. We would have tests 3 of the 5 days of the week. You'd have homework the other days. So if every night when you finished the class, he would either give you a good chunk of homework, 30 to 40 minutes of homework, or you would have a test the next day. So every single night you had to study. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Sunday if you had something on the Monday. So you should have to do that on the Saturday. It was homework. Generally wouldn't have tests on the Monday, but sometimes we did. And it was non-stop. I was being thrown at lots and lots of material. You found yourself having to study on Sundays because that would be your Sunday evening, afternoon, something like that. Okay? Anything else on that working? Yeah, and if there's anything you're not sure about, ask a priest. Ask a good priest. Ask some priest would just say, oh, you can do that. Remember, it is God's day. Here's a way of an analogy to look at it. Somebody gives you a gift on Monday, and you think, wow, it was amazing, somebody gave me a gift. And then on Tuesday, the same person gives you another gift. Wow. And you come back again on Wednesday, and on Thursday, on Friday, on Saturday, and they give you a gift. And on that 7th day, you go to them and say, hey, where's my gift? God gives us all of these days in which we are not obliged. He gives us these days to live, to work out our salvation and everything, but on the Sunday it's His day. We have to give to Him. So we get greedy when we say, no, I want to earn on the Sunday. I want to do this on the Sunday. It's God's day. It's the day that we have to give to Him, and it's just. Our mass attendance on Sunday falls under the teaching of religion, but it also falls under the teaching of justice. It's just that we give to God one. I mean, imagine if God said, I'm going to give you Mondays in which you can work, and every other day of the week is mine. Well, that's sort of like the life of a religious. A priest or something might have a Monday off. Every other day is supposed to be for God. I've got to work for God every other day of the week. 7 days a week. You get the drift. Okay. Chapter 102, the 4th commandment.
Sorry, Father, have we done chapter 98? 99 and 100? Sorry, because the last video I checked it was up to 97.
Yeah, it's last week.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that.
It's up there.
Okay.
It's up there. 102, the fourth commandment. So, here's a question for the last chapter. If you live in Dubai, the UAE, okay, it's a Muslim country, and which day is their day of a Muslim day of worship?
Friday.
So in other words, the working week is Saturday through to Thursday. Then what do you do? Good question, that one.
Lock yourself up on Sunday.
What's that?
Go to Mass on Friday.
Yeah, well, you can go to Mass on Friday, obviously, because I was passing through Dubai once and I was happy to be there on a Friday, and I went along to the Catholic Church there, and they had, I think it was 9 or 10 Masses.
10 Masses.
It was 10 Masses, right, yeah, 10 Masses on the Sunday, and in a whole, it's like, it was the Tower of Babel. There was every language under the sun except for Latin, which makes you think, why have a whole lot of different languages when you can just have one language? But that's another problem entirely. And so I used a house chapel. They had a little house chapel that could seat 10 people in there or something like that, and I was able to say my Mass in there. So in those situations, Christians, I think the Bishops' Conference of the region said that people can fulfill their obligation on a Friday. It was something bizarre, which they would have to get permission from the Pope in order for people to fulfill their obligation on a Friday, which is, of course, morally permissible, but actually wrong, because it does not pay homage to God, which is why these countries are facing in the wrong direction. They're turning away from God by honouring a false religion. But there were Masses on Sundays. How many, can you remember how many Masses? Two. What time of day were those?
So there was Catholic Mass because there's a Catholic school there, St. Mary's. We
Yeah.
used to have a 9 a.m.
9 a.m., okay, for the
There
school
was
Mass,
evening,
okay.
For the evening Mass.
And an evening Mass. Okay, and you would go to the evening Mass sometimes? Okay. Yeah, so there's always that option for people who are working there. You can still make it to the Sunday Mass. In which case you would not be bound to go on Friday, so long as you fulfill that obligation of going along on a Sunday. Lots of people go to those Masses. There are lots of Filipinos and Indians, various other people from other Asian countries who are working in the UAE, and a few Europeans as well, but very few. Yeah, so that is the rare circumstance when something like that. And then there is another thing. So I travelled once, 3 weeks, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I was in Iran. So the Islamic Republic of Iran. On the first Sunday when I was there, I went to the Eastern Christian, I can't even remember, was it? They were actually united to Rome. They had a church and a cultural centre in Tehran. There were 2 Catholic Masses in Tehran, Catholic Masses. One was in the Italian embassy, and one was in this Chaldean or one of the Eastern Catholic churches there, and they had a bishop and a couple of priests, and they were really nice. They had really a big social event afterwards. There were 40, 50 people at their service. So that was one Sunday when I was there, and then the next Sunday when I was there, I was in Shiraz, I think, something like that. Shiraz is not a wine, it's a town. The wine's named after the town because it used to be made in that town. Anyway, so I went to an Eastern Orthodox church. So the Orthodox, we're not allowed to fulfill our Sunday obligation at the Orthodox unless it is impossible to attend a Catholic Mass. In which case, the Eastern Orthodox churches, their sacraments, are they licit or valid? Because the Eastern Orthodox are broken away from the Catholic Church. They do not recognise the Pope as the head of the church. They broke away in the year 1054. So it's like 1,000 years they've been separated from the Catholic Church. But the Catholic Church recognises their bishops and their priests and their sacraments as valid. So all their priests are priests and all their bishops are bishops, because they haven't changed the way and the means in which they make a bishop or make a priest. Even when they broke away from the Catholic Church, they still used the same sacramental system that they did. They didn't change their belief in any of it. The Protestants changed their belief, and so they have only one sacrament, basically, which is baptism. Okay, whereas the Orthodox churches have broken away, and so therefore they have broken away illegally into a schism, but their sacraments are valid. So I attended a divine service of the, I can't remember which Eastern church it was. I mean, there was like 2 old ladies in there, about 100 years old, and the service, I think, at about 3 hours, I was sort of really struggling. Yeah, so I sort of made it to the end. I mean, I didn't speak a word of their language, and they didn't speak a word of anything that I spoke, and I spoke a few, but they spoke Farsi and Azerbaijani or something. Oh, I can't remember. It was really messed up. Anyway, so I fulfilled my Sunday obligation. I didn't understand a word, but hey, our Lord got praised. All right, so that is that commandment of fulfilling the Sundays. So number 102, the 4th commandment: honour thy father and thy mother. Here we go. Okay. What are we commanded? We are commanded to respect and love our parents, to obey them in all that is not sinful, and to help them when they are in need. Okay, respect and love our parents. Respect and love our parents. Secondly, obey them in all that is not sinful. And lastly, to help them when they are in need. We're going to look at all 3 of these, especially the 3rd one, which is very, very misunderstood. Okay, the word honour, spelt with a U, not the American spelling, goodness me. The word honour in this commandment includes the doing of everything leading to the welfare, both material and spiritual, of our parents. One respects his parents, A, by reverencing them as holding God's place. Remember, God has created your parents before he created you, and therefore they come first in the ideal of creation, and therefore they work together with God in procreating their children, and therefore there is a hierarchy. They have authority over you. They are the ones who have named you, and therefore we must respect that position that God has made them before making us. So we need to reverence them as holding God's place. They can give you commands, same as God can. And B, by accepting their corrections willingly, and C, by excusing and hiding their faults. It's a good thing, isn't it? We can hide the faults of our parents. We don't have to publicise them. We can excuse the faults of our parents just as they have excused our faults as well. Remember what the Our Father says? Right? Let us forgive our trespasses as God forgives us our trespasses. It was God himself who gave us our parents. If we reverence God when we respect them who are his direct representatives over us, respect is one duty toward his parents that a child, however old and famous he may become in later life, will always owe his parents. The eye that mocks at his father and despises the labour of his mother in bearing him, let the ravens of the brooks pick it out and the young eagles eat it. That's pretty tough, isn't it? Because that's from the book of Proverbs, and we understand what it means, eh? If you look down upon your parents because you have become into a better situation than them, God is not going to be proud or not going to be happy of you. You should be punished by God if you look down upon your parents. Now, there are nuance to this. If your parents are sinning and sinning publicly, then you must look down on the sin. Okay? If your parents, one of your parents is, let's say, an alcoholic, you can look down on the alcoholism, the abuse of alcohol, as a bad thing. You don't need to. You can take pity on the person. If your parents are divorced and one of them is the reason for the divorce, then you can tell your parent that you are deeply disappointed in the choices that they have made and do not agree with the choices that they have made. And therefore, as a result of that, other actions have to take place. But they remain your parent and therefore need to be reverenced but not supported in what they do. Does that make sense? I'll open this up a little bit more as we keep going along. Number 2, one loves his parents by trying to please them, by helping them and praying for them. Children who love their parents make their home a place of joy and peace. A loving child does not wait to be commanded by his parents, but will do all he can for them, help them out and accomplish their wishes as far as he can without a word from them. Okay? Ideally, this is what proper parenting breeds in children. It breeds proper behaviour in the children, but it requires immense discipline on the part of the parents. Personal discipline right from the young age, from the cradle. If the parents have very great discipline on themselves, then they will learn how to discipline the children the right way and not spoil the children and then pay for it later. Number 3, a young child should obey his parents without question, complaint, or delay, just as he is told. He will show himself glad to obey. Older children may inquire about the reasons for certain commands, but they too should obey their parents in everything lawful. They will do what their parents wish even before they are asked. They will obey willingly and promptly. Again, this comes down to family discipline, an example of the parents. Good example of the parents, the children will follow the good example. Because parents are the direct representatives of God over their children, and such children owe them obedience. Obedience that is the result of fear of punishment or a trick to get some favour is not true Christian obedience, and much of the merit is lost. Honour thy father and thy mother, that thou mayest be long lived upon the land which the Lord thy God will give thee. Number 4. It is a mistake for one to think he knows more than his parents. That is in terms of anybody, doesn't matter how old they are. It is his duty to consult them about important steps he contemplates as marriage, etc. In all important things, God-fearing parents know more than their children. Why is that statement an important one? God-fearing parents know more than their children. Would you say that's subjective or objective? Subjective means it's kind of like someone's opinion. Objective means it's always true. Objective or subjective? What do you think? I'd say it's objective. Because if parents are God-fearing, it means, and they don't have to, it doesn't mean intelligent. It just means God-fearing in the right way. They recognize God's rights. And they will have lived their lives as God-fearing individuals, married couple, and parents, always trying to keep God's laws. And therefore, They have 20 to 30 years more experience of loving God than their children do. So they will always have that more knowledge than their children because they have lived so many more examples of what life can roll out in front of them. When a child is unwilling or ashamed to let his parents know about something, it is generally wrong. If in doubt as to the goodness of an action, one should consult his parents or confessor. Number 5. A grown-up child should provide for his parents in need and make their lives as comfortable as possible. Remember, this is 1940. For example, an adult son with earnings should support his old parents who have nothing. He should help out with the younger children. Now, how much should children financially provide for their parents, and B, their extended family? To what degree should the children be financially supporting the parents? Okay, it's relative. It's going to be relative to how much the children earn. It's going to be relative to the earnings or the financial situation of the parents. And it's also going to be relative into which countries you are living in. Okay, all these are factors. However, children who send money from wealthier countries to poorer countries non-stop for 10, 20, 30, 40 years are wrong. It is wrong. What the children can do is they can help to buy a piece of land or a house just for their parents, not for their siblings, not for their aunts and uncles, not for any extended family. They have no necessity to do that unless they have come across vast wealth in another country. And vast wealth is relative. So let's say somebody is from Eritrea. Okay, do you know where Eritrea is? It's in the Horn of Africa, the northeast Horn of Africa. You have Eritrea, Somalia, Somaliland, countries like that, okay? And South Sudan, maybe that's probably not as much, but countries which have had extreme famine, poverty and wars over the last 30 or 40 years. In such countries, for 5,000 New Zealand dollars, somebody can buy land, build a house, and have livestock. So therefore, even if you're working a construction job in Auckland and earning the standard construction wage, you can send money there and it will be sufficient for a long period of time. So you're not bound to send, you're not filthy rich, but relatively speaking you are. And so you can send money back, but you don't need to send tons. Now, so in New Zealand we've had waves of immigrants over the centuries. My great-grandparents arrived here from the kingdom of, the kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes. No, it was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And they didn't have work, they were peasants. And when the crop years were bad or the fishing years were bad, the family would almost starve. So most of the children went overseas because land was, you weren't allowed to own land unless you were a wealthier person or a landowner. You were always paying rent at all times, and large families, and so you couldn't feed your family if you had a bad year. So by coming overseas, they would start a good life. They would send small amounts back home because they came here and they were just labourers, most of them, because they didn't have university degrees or anything like that. So we have second waves and third waves, post-Second World War waves of Europeans coming in here. In the beginnings, end of the 60s and beginning of the 70s, the Polynesian waves coming in. And then in the 90s to 2000s, we have Asian waves coming in. Okay, so we have various waves of people coming in from less privileged countries and earning more in a country like New Zealand. So one of the more predominant ones in Auckland would be Polynesians, of whom would send home lots. And unfortunately, that money would be spent on jeeps and large TV screens and extravagances and ostentatiousness, and then when they had all this and ruined it or wasted it, then they would start complaining, you're not sending enough. So strictly speaking, these families have zero obligation to send anything else. But this has to be well thought of. This has to be thought of in the light of Christ, God-fearing people. You know, if you were, let's say, a Samoan who came here in the 1970s and went to school and then went to university and got a good job and everything, sent money back to your parents who really had to scrape and bow to bring you here, and you look after your parents, you end up fixing up your family house, that's wonderful. But if you go back there and you see your aunts and uncles driving around in nice cars, you stop the money. You just stop it. You have zero obligation. And we've got to understand that. Zero obligation. Because it is not being spent for the detriment of anybody. It's no good. It's not doing any good. It's just like you going out and wasting your money on things here. It's exactly the same, except you don't get the fun of it. So money is towards an end. It is to get yourself closer to God by means of education or using the money rightly for those who desperately need it. Because there are people in the world who desperately need it. So we've got to be careful about these things. And now we have Asian families, Filipino families, for example, send a lot of money home, and the demands keep coming. And people ask me, oh, we have a lot of financial pressure. So, okay, living in New Zealand is really expensive here. Oh no, we have to send money home. Why? Oh, because we have to. That's what we do. No, you don't. You provide for your parents. Thou shalt honour thy father and thy mother. You know, and oh no, but a whole family helped to get me here. No, hang on. This is 2022. Okay. Airfares aren't that much. They used to be once upon a time. People had to sell everything to try and get someone. I remember living in Africa, people would sell land to try and get one of their children out of Africa into a Western country. But these were not often for God-fearing reasons, okay? Because if somebody didn't make it in the West, they were ashamed to come home. Well, if you don't make it, you didn't make it. It just meant it was harder than what you thought it was going to be. That's life. I mean, I knew of a guy who came back to the village in Africa in a Mercedes, and everybody said, yeah. He rented that in Lagos. He was begging off the streets in Italy. He was a beggar, okay? Scamming people on the streets, basically, in Italy, and scraping away and wearing €300 shoes, of course, and stuff like that. And then when he got back to Nigeria, of course, he has no job over there. He doesn't have a proper visa. He's probably even been kicked out of the country. He will spend money to rent a car for a couple of days to show everybody, I made it, look at me. Everything in that is sinful. Everything in it is. There's nothing wrong for people wanting a better life, okay? Nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with people emigrating legally, okay? There's nothing wrong with that. But there's also nothing wrong with living in poor situations. It's easy to get to heaven. I used to say that to the people in my sermons there. I'd say, if you want to get to heaven, you think you can get outside. I mean, they all used to go like this. I'm going outside. Father, I'm going to go outside, which means out of this country. And they didn't know what the globe looked like. They didn't know there are different time zones. They didn't know what winter is. They didn't know what different money is. They didn't know nothing. None of this. Just dreamed to go outside. I've seen it on TV. Everything is fun on TV. And I would say to them, you want to get to heaven? Stay here. And I even asked from the pulpit once, how many people, name me a name, I said, you can tell me now, right in church, name me a name of anybody who left the village and when they came back they were holier than when they left. The silence was golden. Because they knew many people who'd gone overseas and many people who'd come back, but none of them came back holier. Many of them came back without religion. You could pretty much say it's the same for most countries, eh? When you leave a poor country and you have the faith and you come to a wealthier country, you don't go back holier. That's the exception to the rule. Maybe you. Yes?
Father, so I came to New Zealand and I got baptized in New Zealand. So does that make me holier?
No. Well, yes it does. But we're talking on this one more like a financial reason. You didn't come to New Zealand because you were poor. You came because your mother bought you. But people will immigrate. They will say, right, I'm going to move to Antarctica because they pay great wages in Antarctica. And so they'll leave New Zealand, they'll go and live in Antarctica for 3 or 4 years and earn tons of money, okay, or something like that. Or just, let's say somebody has the opportunity to go to a really wealthy country and they're living in quite a poor country, and so they go to the wealthy country and then get a job and then get money and then have success, but they generally turn their back on God when they do that. That's different for you. You definitely are holier now than you were when you left Korea. To answer your question. Excellent. That was number 5, okay? We should especially provide for our parents' last illness. We should call the priest for their last confession, viaticum, and extreme unction. After their death, we should provide a worthy funeral according to our means. And this is really important because I've seen people in poor countries spend more on funerals than people do here. Now, when I've seen African funerals that are costing $20,000. And where they get $20,000 from, I mean, they'll beg, steal and borrow from every cousin who lives outside to get the money to have a lavish funeral. It's just utterly sinful. We should pray and have masses said for them annually at least and faithfully carry out their last wishes. So this is something I remind all of you. If you want to have a good Catholic funeral, don't rely on your children. If you want to have a really good Catholic funeral, don't rely on your children. This is 2022. The chances of your children being strong in the faith, if you are strong in the faith now, the chance of your children having the same strength of faith in 30 or 40 years are not high. It's possible, it can be done, it's not high. Okay? The majority of the people who go to the Latin Mass here who I know, who are over the age of 50 or 60, the majority of them, probably about 10 or 15% of their children are still strong in the faith. And they're the ones who believe their faith, they practice their faith. 80 to 85% of their children do not practice the faith. So if you're just going to rely on your child, my children will make sure I have a Catholic funeral, rubbish. They will just go to the cheapest option possible. That's just the nature of it. Unless you have raised them with the hardest work you can possibly. Parents say, oh, work, mate, it's hard raising children. I raised them really, really. I had to do my best. Well, when you say you raised them, you did your best. Did you raise them to be holy? That is the most important thing of all.
So do you mean it's expensive?
No, it's got nothing to do with the money. In fact, it's got nothing to do with the money. The children who start to lose their way after they become 18, 19, they start to lose their way, and then 20s, and they get married to any old person they don't think a religious way, and they end up with a marriage that's a mess, and then they themselves can't practice their faith because they are offside with the church. Things aren't going well, and their parents start complaining, why don't you do this properly? And they don't want to get told about these. In other words, that they think their parents are saying, you have made a mess of your life, I raised you properly, what are you doing? They don't care about religion. By the time that they are 30 or 40, they have children of their own. They are not interested in religion, the majority of them. So when their parents die, the funeral becomes about them and not about their parents. In fact, it's more important for them to look as if they put on a good show at the funeral for others and how they feel. They want to choose the music that they think is right. They want to choose the setting that they think is right. The last thing that they are considering is the soul of their parent, especially as the parents are getting closer to death. Because the ones who don't have religion, who have turned away from their religion, they will say things like, don't mention death around mum or dad. We don't want to upset our mum and dad by talking about death. The very thing you should be talking about is death. Especially if your parents were religious. You need to be reminding them of death, and you need to bring the priest in. As soon as the parents start getting some bad health issues, make sure the priest comes in and anoints them. Because if you leave it too late, the parents have lost their their reason, and they have dementia, and they can't confess their sins anymore, and the young ones, oh, old people don't sin anyway. Really? It's just like saying you don't sin. Because what they are saying is we don't believe in sin anymore, and therefore they don't sin. And as a result of that, they will call the priest, hello, your Father Sewage. Oh, Father, hi, it's such and such. Look, my mother's died. Can you come and give her a blessing? They don't even know what the priest would do. And so you turn up at the hospital and the corpse is cold. The soul has left the body. You can't even give them conditional extreme unction. You can't hear the confession. You can't give them the blessing of the apostolic blessing. You can't give them anything. You basically turn up there to do nothing. It's a disgrace. And this is the majority. Luckily here in the Latin Mass we have people who take their faith fairly seriously. But I say to all of the older ones, don't trust your children. Get it written down now. Get it put in your will. Make sure your lawyer knows. Go to your lawyer and insist, because your children aren't going to listen. They haven't listened to you the last 40 years about the faith. Why will they start listening now? Make sure your priest knows. In fact, in your parish, make sure you have other people of your age or something. You have a group, and that you can look after each other. So we have our seniors group here at the parish. If one of the seniors doesn't come on a Sunday, the other seniors know. They will call them, are you okay? Because the children aren't checking up on them. Especially not whether or not they have the last sacraments. It is so important. This is why a parish becomes another family. So that you start to look after each other. Now you know Mrs. Keesing, the one with the white hair. She's at daily mass most of the time. So she had a heart attack on late Thursday night. So I went in and I gave her the last rites on Sunday. Okay, her daughter is one of our parishioners, so she's okay, but it's just an example. All she wants is to die properly. She realised, I've had a heart attack, I could die. I need to be in the state of grace. That's all she wants. Nothing else matters. Not worrying about her clothes or furniture, or none of this matters. For the elderly who love God, the only thing they want is God. But when their children don't believe that, they're not going to give them God, eh? So they dishonour their parents by not fulfilling their parents' wishes at their funeral. Okay, so it's really a tricky thing, and especially when siblings are on different pages. Some siblings practicing their faith, other siblings are not interested. And then when you get to the funeral, the not interested siblings want to have, oh, what about this for the funeral? What about that for the funeral? Oh, come on, man, you haven't been inside a church for 20 years. Why do you want to tell everything that should be in the church? Your mother or father or whatever doesn't want that. Well, how do you know that? Okay, so the difficulties of a lack of faith are real, but cannot be underestimated. Number 6, the perfect model of obedience is the child Jesus. All children should have him for their model. He, God himself, was subject to Mary and Joseph all the time that he lived with them in Nazareth. Remember, he's God, but he was totally subject to them. They could tell him to do something, he would have done it immediately. I mean, he knew they were going to tell him because he was God, but he would act as a child, live as a child all those years of his life. And if the next door neighbours told him, oh, Jesus, can you come and do something? Oh, yes, yes, oh, immediately. He would be obedient, because it is good to be obedient. He that honoureth his father shall have joy in his own children. It's a nice proverb, eh? If you honour your parents, you will have joy in your children. Because what you have done properly, you will then be able to show to your children, and they will see by your example, this is the way to do it. Those who have not honoured their parents often, by divine retribution, have bad children of their own. It's pretty scary. The blessing of God is always with a closely united family, with members loving each other, doing their best to help everybody in the family. Besides being pleasing to God, without such unity, no nation can be strong. Because when families fall apart, societies fall apart. And when societies fall apart, nations fall apart. Okay? Of all my years as a priest, I can think of one family. There might have been more. Struggling a little bit. Maybe 2. Yeah, I can think of one family who all of the children are now grown. So they're all older than 21. One is engaged now. All the others are married, and the father died. But every one of the children are still practicing the faith and going to the Latin Mass. They're the only family I can think of. So I think they had like 6 or 7 children. And when they went through their late teen stages and their other years, and they all ended up getting married, they all practiced the faith. They're the only family I can think of. Everybody else, there's always at least one, or normally half of the kids, who aren't practicing the faith anymore. Sometimes it's only one practicing the faith and the most aren't. But I can only think of one family. One of the sons entered the seminary. He left after a year, I think, or a year or 2. But I met, because I went to the city where most of them live, and I met all of his siblings, and they were all there, and they said, "Oh, our brother was in the seminary." I said, "Oh, right, I remember him." And then they told me their father was a mechanic. He wasn't a wealthy man or anything like that. But he was a fully active guy. Him and his wife, they were totally active in their faith. Their faith was what they loved, and it was fun. And they were rednecks. Some of them were bogans. Like, he was a mechanic, and their Sundays they'd go to Mass, and after that they'd go to the racetrack and go and watch, not horse races, it was car races. Yeah, they were NASCAR fans. Like, they would drive from Canada into the US for a weekend to go watch NASCAR. I mean, you've got to be a redneck to go and watch NASCAR. But they would go to Mass in the morning and then go and watch NASCAR in the afternoon, talk about cars and all that sort of stuff. But because their life was lived, their parents lived their faith. Even though they took them on adventures and stuff like that, their parents, the faith was always the first thing. They always prayed together. Family that prays together stays together. And so you don't have to be wealthy, you don't have to be super educated or anything like that. You've got to live your faith. And when you live your faith, your children will also live that same faith. Because living the faith is not strict and harsh and cold. Living your faith is a beautiful thing. Because it encompasses all things. It can be done with a lot of smiles. The Sunday roast is one of the great things that families should always have. Sunday afternoons, the whole family come together, no matter where they live, an hour away or something. Everybody would come in on a Sunday, and Mum would still cook the roast, just like when all the kids were small, when they grew up. Now they've all left home, Mum still cooks the roast on a Sunday after everybody comes in. These things are important. They might end up arguing half the time, but family that prays together stays together. Say the family rosary in the evening, get over it. And then when somebody is not there, then they start to miss them. They realise, oh man, I really miss that one who's not there anymore. So you have to continue with your family ties. Very, very important. And honouring of the parents. Does the 4th commandment oblige us to respect and obey others besides our parents? Yes. All our lawful superiors. Okay? Also, so just as people who live in Te Aratu, Auckland, New Zealand, who are some of our people that we could call our lawful superiors?
Employers.
Your employer is your lawful superior. They give you money, you work. It's not an equal thing. You're not equal with them. They've chosen to employ you. You give them your work and they pay you a just salary. But they can set the conditions, how much I want you to work. You're working too slow, you're working too fast. They are your superior, lawfully so. Who else could fill in as our lawful superiors?
Police.
The police, yeah, because they enforce the law. The law itself is our lawful superior. And the police enforce that law. So in other words, if you're driving 140 down the motorway, you are breaking the law, and the police will enforce that. Therefore, you are obliged to obey them as the one who enforces the law. So we are obliged to render to the policeman that which the law requires us to do. Okay? Not something beyond what the law requires us to do. Anybody else would be our lawful superiors. Teachers, absolutely. Teachers at university, teachers at school, teachers at kohangare or whatever. Teachers are our lawful superiors. Anybody else?
Parents-in-law.
Sorry?
In-laws.
Your in-laws are also, yes. They have some form of rightful sway over or decision-making around you because you have chosen them by the fact that you've chosen your spouse, you've chosen them as your in-laws as well. And this is obviously something that in certain cultures is really hard because, especially for women, I've seen the in-laws, the mother-in-law of the woman. I've seen some mother-in-laws who are just mother-in-laws from hell almost, and they actually persecute the daughter-in-law. This is gravely unjust. Gravely unjust, to the point that we've got to overlook the sins of our parents and stuff like that. We've got to pray for them and recognise there is some ignorance there. But if you see this is no longer ignorance, that this is malicious, you can move yourself away from this. I've seen this in Indian society a lot, especially in Hindu society, that the daughter-in-laws are very badly treated by the mother-in-laws. And to the point of being quite malicious. So yeah, okay, there's always giving and throwing, but again, the whole point is if we are living as God-fearing lives, these things should not happen. A mother-in-law and a father-in-law should be like parents to their in-laws. They should love them as their own children and treat them as their own children. But when there is this harshness that you are not good enough for my son or my daughter, they're not living the faith in these situations. Right, anybody else could fill in as lawful superiors?
Priests, bishops.
Yeah, the clergy become our lawful superiors in morals, in case of morals and things appertaining to God. What about, can we take this any further, broaden this out a little bit more? What about our government? Yes, they are. Doesn't matter who you vote for. They are the legal and lawful superiors of the country who are able to make laws, change laws, and enforce laws. Okay? And whether or not we like the government or dislike the government, they still have that power vested in them by the majority of the people, or the minority of the people, or whatever, whichever way the government is structured and set up in your country. What if you are therefore living in a dictatorship? Becomes really difficult, doesn't it? So in a dictatorship, or something like a regime, like a communist regime, in situations like that, there is law, and law is written into paper. But the paper law is only on paper, because the government are paying no heed to the actual written law itself. They basically overstep all bounds. So, I lived in Eastern Europe for a short while, and I lived there immediately after the collapse of Eastern Europe, and I realised that everybody knew that all of those Eastern European countries, the former communist countries, they had laws, but you knew that the government were lying and the government were cheating. You knew, they knew that you knew, and so you could break the government's laws in order to survive, but if you got caught, you had to say, yes, yeah, I got caught, yeah. But in a certain way, you weren't sinning, because if you followed the way that they were forcing everybody to obey their laws, you would end up either atheist, dead, or in total poverty. Because the laws were on a piece of paper for a certain reason, but the real reason behind it was the crushing of religion and the crushing of the individual soul. And so, therefore, you're living in a regime which is totalitarian and does not allow for the flourishing of an individual person. But that doesn't mean your soul still can't flourish and go to heaven. Your soul remains free at all times. But you can do your best to survive in those situations by, I suppose the better way of talking about it is dancing around the laws. You don't openly break the laws, but you have to dance around them in order just to survive. And this is what happens in totalitarian regimes, because there is no real law. It's only a law on a piece of paper which is not actually being obeyed. We can't use that excuse in New Zealand. As much as some people want to use it, you cannot. All you got to do is vote. Because you do have a vote, unlike many other countries in the world. So, number one, guardians take the place of parents. The child owes his guardians the same respect and obedience due to his parents. So this we foster parents as well, okay? Teachers, godparents of baptism and confirmation, and elderly persons like grandparents. So all elderly people, not necessarily our lawful superiors, but you would be able to tell us that in places like Korea and Japan, the elderly people are given great respect, publicly great respect. People will be very deferential to anybody who is older than them. In most proper languages, you have different words for the elderly than you have for your equals. In modern day English, nothing. Everybody is you, as opposed to thee, thou, thy. Okay, and in some European languages you use the plural version of you for plural or for somebody who's above you, or formal. So our English has become so muddied and we've become so egalitarian that we've lost the sense of hierarchy, of order, and therefore lost a lot of respect. All old people are to be respected by the young. Honour the person of thy aged man and rise up before the hoary head, so the head that has been seen many, many winters. Okay, so you see the age that we must respect the aged, which is why we have a retirees group at the parish, and we should always support that and honour them. Number two, employees are bound to respect and obey their superiors. They should be loyal and careful about the property entrusted to them. Tutors, nurses must be especially faithful because to them are entrusted human souls. So this is talking about nurses normally in Christian hospitals, because it used to be Catholic hospitals. I was born in a Catholic hospital in Epsom, the Mater Misericordiae, the Mother of Mercy. You know the Mercy Hospital? Its real name used to be Mater Misericordiae. It was opened by Bishop Liston as a Catholic-only hospital. And it had a chapel, and it had nuns, and it had a priest as a chaplain. And if anybody came into that hospital and they were sick, they had a priest on call, they had nuns on call, any of the babies that were born were baptised if there was any danger or anything. That's why we had Catholic hospitals. And they were much cheaper than every other hospital because all the nurses were nuns. And they weren't pulling in big salaries. I was lucky enough to be born in a Catholic hospital. And it used to have a statue of Mary up on its roof. And as you drove up across the viaduct, you could look up at night and the statue of Mary was lit up. They took it down a month ago. Took the statue down a month ago, or about 2 months ago. Because I was over walking around Mount Eden a couple of months ago and I was trying to get around one of the streets to look up and I see it and I said, I could have taken it down. Not good.
Why did they take it down?
It's not a Catholic hospital anymore. They sold it. It's a private hospital now. And probably some workers were up there and they asked, what are we to do with this? And the management probably said, take it down. I don't know. I should try and find out, see if I can get that statue. Beautiful little statue of Our Lady. They must see the children under the care and protect from harm. Okay. It is wrong of inferiors to carry stories about their superiors back and forth. If they cannot be loyal to their master, they should leave his service. Number three, all are obliged to respect and to obey legitimate civil and ecclesiastical authorities in lawful discharge of official duties. Okay? They've got to be lawful and they've got to be official duties. So if the local member of parliament lives across the road and says, hey mate, can you cut my lawn? No. You earn money, you pay someone else to do it. Pay me to do it, I might do it. Let everyone be subject to the higher authorities, for there exists no authority except from God, and those who exist have been appointed by God. What are our duties towards our ecclesiastical superiors? So the church superiors. Obliged to render respect, obedience and support to our ecclesiastical superiors. We should reverence our priest and bishop as our fathers in Christ, obey them in spiritual matters, and pray for them. We should contribute to their support according to our means, just by how much one is able to give without taking it too far. We should appreciate the fact that they sacrifice their time, health and whole lives for the good of our souls. St. Paul tells us, Obey your superiors and be subject to them, for they keep watch as having to render an account of your souls. One offends God gravely if he opposes bishops or priests, speaks ill of them, gossips about them, or neglects to contribute to their support. Number 2, we must be loyal to the Holy Father and obey him in spiritual matters. He is the visible head of the body of Christ, the church of which we are the members. We must honour him, respect his authority. In reverencing the Pope, we but reverence Jesus Christ, whose representative he is. We must assist him in the arduous duties of his office by spiritual and material offerings, like we did for Bishop Lowe. You know, we gave him that nearly 8,500 rosaries. I got a card today from him, handwritten. Thank you very much for that spiritual bouquet. It was really wonderful. Great, okay? Without exception, hierarchy and laity, all in the church, without exception, are subject to the Pope and are bound to yield to him perfect obedience in all spiritual matters. We should pray for the Pope and, if we can, give him material help. Number 3, on their part, bishops and priests have the obligations of caring for those under their charge, of teaching them, here you are, their duties and helping them lead good lives. They are bound to pray for their flocks and to offer Mass on Sundays and holidays for the members of their diocese or parish. Questions on the 4th commandment?
What if some priests aren't priests?
Pray for them. They are still priests, okay? And they are chosen by God, and their lives should be entirely and utterly God's. They should live only for him and live by him. And if they have failed to do that, then depending on your circumstance and what circumstance arises, you should not belittle them around others, but you should definitely, if there is something that perhaps you can help in trying to get the wrong that has been done made right, you can write to their superiors in all charity. But you can definitely pray for them. And if you are on terms with them whereby they are interested to hear what you've got to say, in private you can mention to them that you are offended or upset or concerned or whatever. And if you see them doing anything which is illegal, like with regards to children or anything like that, then you have an obligation to report them. But you must assume, just like you would in anybody who sees somebody, you can't just assume, well, that person's definitely committing a theft. Well, if you see them climbing through a window and they've got a balaclava on or something, okay, that's going to be a bank robbery or a theft or something like that. But if we can't judge the book by its cover. We see a situation, we've got to know better than just by, oh, that boy went in the sacristy, that he must be getting attacked out there. Not necessarily, he might be a mass server or something like that, okay? So you've got to be clear about it, and if others are aware, that you are also aware, you can speak about it with others, but you can't broach it to others just by way of gossip. And I'm not talking a priest abusing someone, I'm just talking a priest who's overstepped his bounds. So let's say, for example, a priest from the pulpit says something that is blatantly false. Then it's not just your opinion, everybody else has heard it. If he says there's 4 people in the Trinity, okay, you've got to approach him and say, Father, was that a joke? No, of course not. Okay, that's heresy. No, it's not. Then you can say, would you put it in writing, please? Why? Oh, because I just want a copy of it, just so I can learn or whatever. And then you send it off to the bishop. Okay, because he's got to be stopped in that case.
Mm-hmm. Isn't the line saying that I'm just going to copy and learn?
No, you want to get a copy of it. So can I have a copy of it, please? You are learning that is what he is saying. You're not actually learning that that's right. You're learning from what he's saying. You're learning that it's wrong, and that he's proving that he's saying that what he's saying is wrong. There's many, it's multifaceted. What you can do is you can approach a good priest in the confessional to ask them about it, which means that he can't speak about it outside, unless he then says to you, you need to speak to somebody about this outside the confessional. And that was what a good priest would do. If you've seen something, let's say you've seen a priest, you're on the parish financial council and you've seen the priest nick $10,000, okay? And you know that he has because you're the one counting the money, or you're doing books, and then you see him driving around in a new car and he asks you to sign off on it or something like that. And he made it for $9,999 because if it's $10,000 it has to go through the diocese. and you realise, okay, this is wrong, then you have a duty to report it. And you can just go straight to the bishop in that case. Yeah, it's a funny old age.
With older children, where do they draw the line in terms of your parents are always right, your in-laws are always right? Because island families have this problem. Like
Yeah.
you have parents that they can keep interfering into your marriage and
Right.
how you raise children.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, so the parents are never always right, for starters, any more than we are always right. The first thing is the interference of the parents, the word interference itself. Let's prefer to just use the word the influence. It can be a negative influence or positive influence, but the influence of the parents over their children ends when the children leave home. Okay, the influence. Once the children leave home, they are free to live their life as they wish. When they're no longer being fed or clothed by the parents and they are supporting themselves, then they are free to do what they want. Now, of course, in Polynesian society, the parents still have a massive influence, as do aunts and uncles. But that having been said, as I said before, this financial support of parents and aunts and uncles, no obligation whatsoever. And they will yell and scream and all the rest of it, but if they're God-fearing people, they will not. So most of the time, the interference, the influence of parents amongst their children and their grandchildren's family, if it's not based on strong Christian principles, it can be ignored. In fact, even should be. Because it's unholy, it's unjust, and it's not good example to the children. You render respect to them, and if they get angry that you're not doing what we want, or you're not building this at our house, you're not providing us financially or something, then away from the children you can say to your parents, I humbly accept all that you have said to me. However, you have a car, you have a bank account, you have a TV, you have a house over your head, you have all of these things. Asking more money from me for things that are only worldly are a bad example to your grandchildren. And if they start getting angry at that, then so be it. You have rendered them, and you continue to render them, more assistance by being honest than you would by being dishonest. Now, of course, I'm only putting this into one simple answer. There are a multitude of tentacles that go in every direction around that, and no answer is going to be one fits all. However, the ideal of is this pleasing to God is the question you need to ask in all these situations. Just by being obedient and obedient and obedient and obedient and letting them get away with all sorts of ills, it's not helping them. It's not helping their souls, it's not helping your souls, and it's not helping the souls of your children by the example of what they see. Your role is to love your parents and obey them in all things that are not sinful. Because some of these things are sinful, aren't they? Because they just cross the line.
Even if you have to love them from afar, like
Yes.
for instance, if your parent left your other parent,
Oh yeah.
and you can't condone what they've done, so you just won't see them.
So, tough love is love. Fake love is not love. Okay, so the situation of parents who are divorced, and if they are both equally at fault in the divorce, then you love them as much as you can. If one of them then remarries without the first marriage being ended, the parents then fall into mortal sin. They can divorce and separate, and the church can say, okay, it is what it is, they're not in sin. But if they remarry while their other spouse is still alive, then they enter into a union which is displeasing to God. You owe no respect to the union. You owe respect to the parent, but not to their union. You owe no respect to their decision of their new union. And you do not have to pay any credence to the union. Now this takes, again, it's multifaceted, it runs out in many directions. So can you then, they say, well, why can't you accept my new husband or my new wife? Well, I'll tell you what, if you come to my house and there's just the two of you, we can sit around and chat and it'll be fine. But if you want me to come to the family event in front of your new wife and act as if your new wife or your new husband and it's absolutely normal. I cannot do that because I will give credence to that which is not pleasing to God. Does that make sense? And in doing that, you might be the only sibling. You might even be the only one who's actually loving your parent who needs to rectify the situation before their death. Harsh. And this might last 10, 20, 30, 40 years. But the salvation of the soul is the highest law. Okay? That's a dictum in the Catholic Church. The salvation of souls is the highest law. Which means the law of obedience, the law of respect and all that are very, very important. But you are respecting the parent by not respecting their false marriage. Because when you are respecting that false marriage, you are giving them a pat on the back and yeah, it's okay, I accept that. But God doesn't. So that's a really tough one. This is a 21st century problem, a 20th and 21st century problem, because our ancestors, they just grinned and bared it. When the other marriage wasn't working, they just grinned and bared it. Okay, if it's abusive, then they need to separate. But needing to separate doesn't mean the marriage ends. The marriage continues on until death. Make sense? And if you've got more questions, just bring them to me. I know we all have, everybody knows somebody who's in one of these situations. Let's pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Glory be to the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Glory be to the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Glory be to the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Benedictio Dei omnipotentis Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti descendat super vos et maneat semper. Amen. Thank you.